Hello, it's me, Miss Terrell, back for another edition of AP US History, still in period 3. Today we're focusing on the Revolutionary War, what that looked like, what the ramifications of the the outcome of the American Revolutionary War have on the 13 colonies. So the American Revolutionary War was essentially a long and bitter struggle, starting with the first shots at Concord and Lexington, which we talked about in class today. Remember the shots heard around the world in 1775, and ending with a peace treaty in 1783. Americans, by participating in this war and it their victory, essentially, the Americans forged a new national identity. Just a little bit of information about who fought in the war, looking at some numbers and some statistics. 2.6 million people lived in the 13 colonies at the time of the war. 40% of the population actively participated in the struggle against the British. And again, we talked about this group of people in class today. These people were known as the Patriots. So they were for independence and for separating from the Crown and the Parliament. 20 to 30% of the population, however, sided with the British, and they were known as loyalists. Let's look at the Patriots first. Not the team that's playing in the Super Bowl this weekend, but they do use the Patriots on the sidelines. If you watch the Patriots games, you can see the people dressed up as American Revolutionary War reactors, and they fire their muskets when the Patriots score and when they come out on the field and all that jazz. So the Patriots were the largest number. The largest number of Patriots were from New England, which makes a lot of sense, and also from Virginia. Most of the soldiers were reluctant to travel outside of their own region. They were kind of, not that they were homebodies, but they were interested in protecting their space, not interested in protecting the space of others. They would serve as local militia, and then they would return home and work at whatever their job was, go back to farming or whatever it was that they did. So even though there were several 100,000 people who fought as patriots, this is such an interesting number. George Washington never had more than 20,000 regular troops under his commands at once, which is insane when you think about the fact that they were fighting a standing, legitimate army, the most powerful army at the time, the most powerful armed forces at the time anyway, in the British Empire. And not to have more than 20,000 troops at one time is just incredible. It's insane. His army was always short on supplies, always poorly equipped, and rarely paid. So there wasn't a whole lot of reasons for them to stay there except for their patriotism and their belief in the cause and hoping to create a better new world or country or independent nation for their families. I'm going to look at African Americans and their dealings with the war. Originally, George Washington rejected the idea of African Americans serving in the Patriot Army. However, when the British went to them and promised them freedom, especially obviously to the enslaved people who joined the British side, George Washington quickly rethought his stance and then made the same offer. As a result, about 5,000 African Americans served in the Patriot Army. Loyalists, also known as Tories, okay, these people maintain their loyalty to the king and to the empire, the parliament. There were 60,000 American Tories who fought next to the British troops. This was a huge positive for the British military because they supplied the British Army with food, weapons, arms, whatever have you, ammunition, and they knew the layout of the land and the geography better than the British troops did, so it was a huge bonus for the British Army. It is estimated that there were about 520,000 to 20 to 30% of the population at this time were Tories. So 20 to 30% of the population. They tended to be wealthier than most of the people and essentially wealthier than most of the patriots. And they were more conservative in their values, their ethics and morals and outlook, and certainly the way they felt government should have control or should not have control in their daily lives. Many American Indians sided with the British because the British promised them limited colonial settlements, the British government and army promised that they would limit colonial settlements in the West if the natives fought with the British. Looking initially at some early losses and hardships for the colonial army and for the Patriots. The first 3 years of the war, 1775 to 1777, went really bad for Washington and for his poorly trained and equipped Revolutionary Army. They lost almost every major battle, and eventually Britain actually occupied New York and Philly. So the main hubs of this patriotic zeal, and Philly is where the Declaration of Independence was signed and where the First and Second Continental Congress is meeting. So it's like Britain came in and kind of took their capital, and Britain was in charge and taking over, and the Patriots are just like, okay. And on top of that, they had many economic issues. However, there was a turning point for American troops with the victory of Saratoga in October of 1777. And because of this victory, France was persuaded to join the war against the British. So now the American Revolutionary Army is going to get a big help with the with bringing France on board, because they have well-rested troops, they have money, they have arms, they have boats. It's going to work out really well. Once the French join the war effort, this actually opens up the war. America goes on a string of victories, and eventually, after the Americans win at Yorktown, Britain realizes that they're not going to win the war. And the writing is kind of on the wall, and America is going to be victorious here in the American Revolutionary War. So this is when we see the Treaty of Paris, which comes about in 1783. And the Treaty of Paris has 4 sanctions, if you will, provides these 4 things. Britain would recognize the existence of the United States as an independent nation. Obviously, this is a huge deal. Number 2, can you see me? Number 2, the Mississippi River would be the western boundary of the nation. So we're still not spread all the way out from coast to coast. We didn't really know what was going on over there yet. That comes later. But we definitely expanded our nation significantly from the 13 colonies hugging the coast all the way out to the Mississippi River. Number 3. Americans would have fishing rights off the coast of Canada. This would help with their business economic growth. And number 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Americans would pay debts owed to British merchants and honor loyalist claims for property confiscated during the war. So kind of an olive branch there with number 4. Meanwhile, the ink is drying on the Treaty of Paris, and even before that, while the Revolutionary War is going on, leaders of the 13 colonies are diligently working to change the colonies into independently governed states, each with their own constitution. Also, the Revolutionary Congress tried to define the powers that the new centralized government for the nation will essentially have. And this gets kind of dicey, because they don't want to be another British Empire. They don't necessarily want to have a monarchy. They obviously don't want to have a monarchy. They don't want to tax everybody. So it's very interesting to see what they come up with. So first we're going to look at state governments. By 1777, 10 of the former colonies had written constitutions. These constitutions were written and adopted by the state's legislatures, and they were subjected to heated debate between liberals, those that wanted to protect individual rights, and conservatives who felt the need for law and order. Each state constitution began with a bill or a declaration listing the basic rights and freedoms that belong to all citizens by right and no state official could infringe upon. So, like the Declaration of Independence, right? Freedom of, fill in the pursuit of happiness, right? You know what I'm talking about? I think you do. Separation of powers. So the power of the state governments were given 3 separate branches. This sounds a lot easier, but it at the time was not easy for the delegates to come up with this idea. But they had legislative powers, and they chose to have a bicameral legislation, so 2 houses in the legislature. Executive powers, they would elect a governor. And then judicial powers would be the powers that come from a system of courts. Very much set up like we have today. Voting. The right to vote was extended to all white males who owned some property. If you wanted to hold an office in said government, if you wanted to be an elected official, you were usually held to a higher property qualification than voters. So it had to be a little bit more significant, a little bit more wealthy than your average Joe. Looking at the centralized government, they come up with something called the Articles of Confederation. And this essentially is the first constitution for the United States as a nation. It's adopted by the Congress in 1777, and it's sent to all the states for ratification. And it gets ratified in March of 1781. So I think you can see from the time period alone that it was up for a lot of debate. What accomplishments do we have here with the Articles of Confederation? 1, we won the war. Great. 2, we passed the land ordinances of 1785. Essentially, Congress establishes a policy for surveying and selling the western lands. 3, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which sets up rules on how to create new states. Then look at what kind of power the Articles of Confederation has. Sets up a unicameral Congress, right, for the whole independent nation. 1 vote per state, and you need 9 out of 13 votes to pass. The Articles of Confederation have the power to wage war, and also has the power to make treaties, send diplomatic representatives, and borrow money. Now, with the good comes the bad, and there certainly are some problems with the Articles of Confederation. 1, did not regulate commerce, could not collect taxes. Financially, most war debt was unpaid. Paper money becomes almost worthless. Number 2, foreign, in terms of relationships with other countries. European nations had little respect for the new nation, kind of like we were a baby and trying to find our footing, or like a new baby deer who's trying to walk for the first time. We have to figure out who we are and what we want to be. Britain and Spain threatened to take advantage of the U.S. by expanding their interests into the West. And then, of course, we see some domestic uprisings with Shays' Rebellion, which we'll talk more about in class. But the people get upset, and they want to see some change, and that comes out of Shays' Rebellion. So again, we'll talk about that in class. Let's look at some social changes. In addition to revolutionizing the politics of the 13 states, the War of Independence also profoundly changes American society in general. Some changes happen right before the war ends. Others, of course, evolve over time. Number 1, we have no more aristocratic titles. No more lords, dukes, barons, etc., etc., etc. Number 2, separation of church and state. States refuse to give financial support to any religious group. And number 3, women. Women are very important during the war. They keep the economy going. They followed their men into battles. And however, still remain second-class citizens, and they really did not appreciate that. Slavery. Slavery continues on. The southern states, some of the middle colonies practicing slavery. And however, the idea of slavery really is very hypocritical and contradictory to the spirit of the revolution. The Continental Congress abolished the importation of slaves or enslaved people. And after the revolution,